Hello and welcome to I Should Say That Out Loud. I'm your host, Donna Brendel. This is the second episode of 2025 of my project theme for the year. I'm covering the different definitions of project, and this month the definition from the Oxford Dictionary is to estimate or forecast on the basis of trends or data. And I have a lot of books and experts and research to share with you going back to the early 1900s and all the way through to our modern day 2000s, 2025 even. I'm really excited to pull together the origins, I think, of where we are today, how we've gotten to where we are today, and where I think some of these ideas and trends have started. We'll see what you think. Tell me what you think. Tell me if you agree. To let you know a little bit more about myself, I am a late diagnosed woman on the autism spectrum, and I also am dyslexic, and I have OCD and anxiety. So I have a broad range of the things, the comorbidities that can often come with autism. I have a lot to share today, and I'm hoping that you can see the trends and the development over the decades and over the past 115 years, give or take. Moving into the modern day research, trends, and data, I'm so excited to share from this book, Ido in Autism Land. Climbing Out of Autism's Silent Prison by Ido Kedar. I have so much to share from his book. First, I want to share from forward to Ido's book is written by Yoram Bona, PhD, Department of Human Biology, University of Haifa. And on page 9, Dr. Bona, says, I thus met Ido and asked him many questions which he answered with passion, as if he took upon himself the mission of being a mouth, in quotes, for those miserable mute autistics who are locked internally, underestimated, and hopeless, end quotes. But despite being very intelligent, Ido's skills do not make him a servant, nor a 1 in a million genius. What he's trying to say is that just because Ido has been able to learn to type and write and bring his inner thoughts to the outer world, it does not make him a one in a kind savant, not servant, savant, or a 1 in a million genius. He's saying that other nonverbal autistic people and children, adolescents, can learn to do what Ido has learned to do, which is so exciting. And then he goes on to say, Dr. Bona, that yet the main obstacle which prevents his true cognitive talents and personality to be expressed by his behavior is a problem of output, a severe disconnection between his explicit, intentional, conscious brain system and the automatic or procedural one, which is usually under full control, but in his case so often is not. This claim is radically different from the common view that severe autism is associated with abnormal development of cognitive skills and a severe cognitive impairment. That is so important. So what he's saying is that just because an autistic person cannot communicate or does not speak does not mean that the person has intellectual impairment. It could be, but it might not be. It could be because they're unable to control their conscious brain system with their automatic procedural system of speaking and physical movement. And I like how he uses the word output. He says that Ido's cognitive talents and personality are prevented from being seen because of a problem of output. And that, to me, is my word project for the year. Projecting, outputting my thoughts, my inner thoughts into the outside of me, into the world. And Ido has been able to do that because he's been able to learn to type. On page 11, Dr. Bona says, "In the circumstances in which I observed Ido, he expressed his thoughts impressively and provided interesting insights into his neurological condition, which may help focus further scientific research. Reading this book and my interaction with Ido had a significant impact on my thinking." So it's shifted even this doctor's thinking, as it is not just a validation of other severely autistic people who write, but sheds light, again, I think it projects this idea, sheds light on the core deficit that often prevents intellectual behavior in the severely autistic. He's not saying it prevents intellectual cognition, but intellectual behavior that is speaking and communicating what the autistic person is able to have going on internally, that they're not able to project outside of them. I am hopeful that his insights, so well expressed in his book, will contribute to the understanding of the severely autistic by parents and clinicians and lead to better interventions and treatment for those with his condition. So positive and hopeful. I don't know how long it will take for others to get to this point, but I'm so hopeful that this will exponentially get faster for other families and other autistic children. Now we're in the introduction to Ido's book, which was written by his mother, Tracy Kedar. And on page 13, she says of her son Ido, he corrects what he sees as erroneous premises, in quotes, in much of autism theory and treatment, and relays how he acquired communication and recognition as a sentient being. I love that. He was always a sentient being, but was not seen as one because he was unable to verbally speak his thoughts, which were all the time going on in his brain. He had always had the ability to think and be an intelligent human being, but because he couldn't speak, he was not seen as such. On page 14, his mom says, beyond his insights on autism, though, Ido shares his story of personal growth as he comes to accept himself as someone who will always be different from others. So even though he's been able to learn to communicate, he is still different from others. The reader follows Ido on this journey as his voice shifts from the rage and bitterness of an unhappy 12-year-old, free at last to communicate burdens held inside for years, to that of a profound spiritual thinker making peace with his life. In this later stage, Ido triumphs academically and in so many other ways while studying a general education curriculum in high school. That is beautiful. Ido's mom, Tracy, goes on to say on page 14, and here is one of the examples of the shift from ABA to other therapies, as I was talking about earlier. His teachers and myriad experts assumed, based on his difficulty following instructions, lack of speech, and odd behaviors, that his intellect and knowledge matched his actions. They insisted that the only way he could learn was by being slowly and progressively instructed in the basic information that human beings need to function. This would be done through drilling, flashcards, and repetition for hours each day in a program known as Applied Behavioral Analysis, or ABA. While specialists held meetings in Ido's presence to talk about why he didn't progress on a drill or how to improve his score on another, on the inside he was screaming, "I understand. I already know what a tree is. Please help me learn to communicate." On the outside, the scream came out through his hands, vigorously flapping at the wrists. This was quickly redirected with the command, "Hands quiet." He was trapped. So much miscommunication was happening through this process of trying to help him with good intentions, but with very sad outcome. On page 15, Tracy, his mom, says, many experts advised us that he was not even aware of the world outside him. Of course, if one assumes that a child's vocabulary is limited to a tiny number of nouns and verbs, real communication is impossible. It's out of reach. It isn't taught. Some in their servitude, and she's referring to the servitude to the research and to the older modalities of treatment, refused to even explore Ido's communication once it emerged. They rejected it as impossible. They were not open to a new possibility, or as Ido says, they were, in quotes, blinded by their professional biases, end quote. That's really sad and frustrating, because just because a scientific theory has been put forth doesn't mean it's proven. And children like Ido, when they disprove an old theory, and then the experts say, well, no, you haven't disproven it, and then punish him or continue to hurt him by keeping him in this box that they're not letting him out of. Thankfully, Ido was introduced to a new theory and a new method of treatment by a woman named Soma, S-O-M-A. I'm not going to pronounce this correctly, but I'll give it a shot. Mukhopadhyay, Mukhopadhyay, who discovered a method she called rapid prompting, or RPM. And this is on page 33 of Ido's book. Soma, taught her son Tito through this method that she developed and was able to teach him to speak and communicate. And then once it became effective with her own son, she started to attempt to use this method on other children, and it was effective on other children as well, which is incredible. So now she is using this method on other children in addition to her son Tito and Ido. Going ahead to Ido's writings now in his book on page 41, he writes a short paragraph at the beginning of each age range that he writes from. He wrote essays at all of these different developing ages once he started to learn how to do this. And he has this synopsis of a paragraph at each of these age ranges. So for age 12, he calls it the year of anger and sorrow. He says, as I approached adolescence, I was hit hard by sadness and frustration because of my autism and all that it kept me from doing. Though some of my essays are angry, I felt it was important to keep them in here because this is where I was emotionally during that difficult year. I had to work through the pain I felt because of all the years that passed before I could communicate. I also worked hard to understand myself and my symptoms better. What an important year to include and share with the world. I'm so glad he kept that in. On page 88, this is so fascinating to me because I'm also reading, I'm not sharing from this book today, but I'm reading Dr. Ian McGilchrist's book, The Master and His Emissary, on the left and right brain hemispheres and how they function differently and how they complement each other and how they've been misunderstood over the years. And so this paragraph that Ido shares on page 88 is fascinating and connects strongly to Dr. McGilchrist's research. Ido says, the title of this very short essay is called Remembering I Have Two Sides, from April of 2009. I have a habit of washing one hand. I often forget about my right hand and need to be reminded to wash it. My dad suggests it may reflect a lack of connectivity between the two sides of my brain. It's one more clue to unlock autism. I will be writing more about Dr. McGilchrist's research and theories on left and right brain hemispheres in my third memoir, Faith Edition, because I believe that my faith has helped me move from my left hemisphere into my right hemisphere and even allow them to work better together and separately as they were designed to do. But I will talk much more about that much later. That is just a very short foreshadowing into my third memoir. And then on page 92, Ido is now 13, and he titles this section, Age 13, Starting to Let Go of the Past. What a healing idea. And to hear that as Ido is learning to communicate, he is able to heal from the trauma of older modalities of treatment and therapy that caused him harm, and just the harm of his lack of communication that caused him. He says on page 92, at age 13, as you read, when I was 12, I still had the resentments of many years of silent frustration brewing in me. Internally, I was struggling to move on emotionally and to feel happier, but I needed to deal with my early misery when my autism stopped me from being educated at the level I needed. As I started seeing success in my daily life and came to analyze my autism more, I began to feel more and more hopeful, and this allowed me to begin to let go of my anger. Beautiful. And that was only 1 year after learning to communicate and really start writing these essays. Only a year of progress in an autistic young person's emotional healing is incredible. I think that gives hope for even neurotypical people who struggle with mental health, and how much progress can be had in working on letting go of anger and healing from the past, from the mind of a young child. It's beautiful. On page 116, Ido is now 14, and he titles this section Motivation. In this year, I continued to educate others about autism, do more speeches, and to help people with autism and their families. I saw hope and possibility more and more, and I realized that by improving my own self-control and skills, and by accepting myself, I could better achieve my goals. This helped me to become a happier person. So even though he's able to communicate now, he still has some of the stims and the behavioral manifestations of his frustration and of his autistic brain. And he's learning to control it more, but it still can have a mind of its own. And he still struggles with it. So, like I said before, autism is not something that you can be cured of, but you can develop skills and improve your life through the correct and proper modalities of treatment and help and support. And then on page 128, Ido is now 15, and he titles this section, High School for Bad and Good. High school is a dream I am living now. Just having the chance to learn and to be welcomed in a friendly and tolerant general education high school is awesome. It has been a journey because I discovered that not all educational systems are open or healthy, as you will read. So he talks about the good and bad of high school and education in the essays that follow. On page 150, he talks about exercise as a therapy modality for autism, which I am very passionate about. Exercise and how it's helped me in my recovery and in my growth as a person. This essay is titled Exercise as a Form of Autism Treatment. February, being fit enables me to tell my responsive body what to do. I work out with a trainer now because I need to have my body learn to be responsive. Now I see where my problems lie. My soft muscle tone needs to get stronger. My cardio endurance needs to improve, and I need more core strength, so I work on everything. Stretching is my most necessary thing, and I detest it because it is painful. I will do it because I need to, and it is worth the hurt. A lot of my current problems could have been prevented if people had worked on this when I was small. I think it is essential to work on fitness and flexibility for autistic people in a regular program. I see a lot of children where I work that really could benefit from exercise. I think all children can benefit from exercise, but the struggle is communicating to them the importance of it and getting them to cooperate with it. And then their inability to communicate, either I don't feel like it right now, or I don't understand what you're trying to ask me to do, or my body won't do what my brain is trying to tell it to do because of apraxia, which Ido talks about. It's just the communication struggles are difficult. So even though Ido wishes he could have done it when he was younger, it just might not have been possible until his communication was at a level where he and his trainer were able to communicate. On page 152, Ido writes this essay entitled Letter to a Friend with Autism. It's from March of 2012. In the very last paragraph, it's 3 paragraphs long. The last paragraph is so beautiful. He says, "You can communicate more too if you really take it in stride. I mean, it is hard to allow yourself to communicate with others after years of stimming inside." Stimming is the things that autistic people do to calm our sensory processing. The flapping of the hands, the playing with the stim toys, all of those things. And internal stimming too. Like I do a lot of internal stimming. I'm not going to get into all of that right now, but in the journey to communication, you must embrace the world outside of your obsessions. I see your sensory toys. It's an incredible escape. Still, I see your mom wants to know you inside. Oh, that's so poignant. Your thoughts matter to her. She misses hearing them because deep down inside, you guard them so tightly. It is liberating to let go, to communicate, and to join the world in the regular ways of school or family. Don't give in to the sorrow, because we can be free in spite of the hard challenges autism gives. What an encouragement to any autistic child from this autistic adolescence perspective. So beautiful. And he ends his book with a prayer on page 156. Ido says, this essay is titled Climbing Out of the Pit. And he says, I really pray that one day all nonverbal autistic people will have the opportunity to learn communication and show the world that lack of speech is not the same as lack of understanding. What a beautiful prayer. And I agree with that, Ido. And I say amen to that prayer. That is Ido Kedar. What a beautiful book. And this was copywritten in 2012. Next, I want to read from this very new book called Stop the World, I Want to Get Off. A Guide to Understanding and Supporting the Recovery of Autistic Burnout in Children and Young People by Jodie Clarke. And the foreword is by Luke Bearden. This was copyrighted in 2025. Just weeks ago, a month ago, just this year. Okay, so in chapter 1 of this book, Stop the World, I Want to Get Off, author Jodie Clarke gives the definition on page 19 of autistic burnout. And she shares this definition, which was given by Dr. Raymaker of the National Autistic Society, who says that autistic burnout is a mental health crisis. So Dr. Raymaker defines autistic burnout as a state of physical and mental fatigue, heightened stress, and diminished capacity to manage life skills, sensory input, and or social interactions, which comes from years of being severely overtaxed by the strain of trying to live up to demands that are out of sync with our needs. And that's Dr. Raymaker and others from 2020. And on the same page, 19, Jodie Clarke shares Karen Rose's definition of social exhaustion, which is similar but different from autistic burnout. And it's also an integral part of the autistic experience. So social exhaustion is where just your day, just living, talking to people, being assaulted by senses, exhausts you to the point where you can only collapse in a heap at the end of the day or at the end of the week, depending on your constitution. And in parentheses, remember this won't be identical for everyone, but it certainly will be similar. This happens at any age from a baby up until old age. And this is from Karen Rose, 2018. On page 20, Jodie Clarke shares burnout versus depression. She says, I'm not a medical clinician, so I'm not going to be sharing a lot here other than to say that autistic burnout and depression mimic each other very closely and can co-occur. Autistic burnout can and often does lead to or cause depression. The concerns I have are when the child is treated for and only seen through the medical lens of depression, and not through the autistic lens of burnout caused by the environment. And on page 24, she shares about movement and how movement can be an antidote. She doesn't call it this, but I call movement an antidote to autistic burnout. It has been for me. It's been part of my recovery and self-care process. So on page 24, Jodie Clarke shares where pupils are expected to sit still at desks or on carpets. Instead, we often find our neurodivergent children sitting oddly, in quotes, when they aren't given the option to move. To meet this need, they sit with feet under bums. She's from England or from the UK, or legs wrapped around chair legs, or with their knees scrunched up to their chests or on one leg, or pushing against the floor to lean back on the chair. I did this when I was in grade school, and I was balancing the desk on my knees as I leaned back in my chair, and I did it for so long that I got a little overconfident in my ability to balance the desk on my knees, and I toppled backwards, and the whole desk fell on top of me. It was so embarrassing. Moving on. She says that children will naturally allow their bodies to do what their brains need them to, in parentheses, providing they aren't told to stop. Movement supports processing for all humans, but for neurodivergent people, it is essential. Without sensory input for the brain, for the body, the brain is unable to produce the chemicals it needs to function. Wow, is that important for so many things? For brain function, for emotional functioning, for cognitive processing and functioning. Movement is so important for emotional health, for mental health. And then we're forcing kids in the schools to sit in a desk and not move their bodies, which is what allows their brains to produce those chemicals, those neurochemicals and neurotransmitters that are so needed for their health. Okay, that's all I'm going to share from Jodie Clarke's book today. The last book I'm going to share from today, I can't believe I'm getting to the end of this stack of books, but this is, again, another new book. Let's see, was this published? Yes, this was published in 2025 as well. And this is called Improving Mental Health Therapies for Autistic Children and Young People. And then the subtitle is Promoting Self-Agency, Curiosity, and Collaboration. Wow, does that sound like Dr. Montessori's method from the early 1900s that I started with today? What a coinky-dink. And this is edited by Georgia Pavlopoulou. I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong. With Laura Crane, Russell Hearn, and Damian Milton. Forward by Peter Fonagy. And this was produced by or with the help of, I'm not sure, the Anna Freud National Centre for Children and Families. Best practice. Whew, that is a mouthful. Okay, I want to share from the foreword by Dr. Peter Fonagy, with lots of letters after his name. I'll put that in the show notes. He is the head of the Division of Psychology and Language Sciences at University College London, chief executive of the Anna Freud. He says on page VIII, page 8 of the foreword, a central theme revisited in this book is the concept of the double empathy problem. The powerful idea that interactions between autistic and neurotypical individuals are marked by mutual two-way challenges in understanding. This is really important to start to wrap our brains around how we can have this disconnect in communication between autistic or neurodivergent people and neurotypical people. But I want to add my thoughts to this in that there can be a double empathy problem between two autistic people, or between many autistic people, and I've seen this in my own two children who are both neurodivergent, that one autistic or neurodivergent person can present with certain symptoms and struggles, and another autistic or neurodivergent person can present with other struggles and problems, and they can be so completely different that the one can discount the problems of the other or believe that they're not true, as in the case of my children. And that caused so many interpersonal conflicts between them growing up, where they didn't believe that the other's issues were because of their different brain functions. And they thought they were just behaving that way to be mean, which, I mean, that happens in childhood. But the pattern and the struggle of what they most struggled with in living under the same roof together, which really came to a head when they were adults, was caused by the underlying cause of those behaviors were because of their neurodivergence. And it took me so many times of explaining to them that their struggles were different, even though they had the same title of neurodivergent issues. They presented with different struggles, and it took so long for them to accept that and wrap their brains around it, and to learn to respect each other and give each other the space and boundaries that they needed. And I think it took them living under different roofs to be able to respect each other and have a better relationship. And I've also heard of other neurodivergent families who have taken the extreme step of living under different roofs for different children in the same family for the same reason, that they just could not live in the same household together. They loved each other and visited each other, but they just could not live together as children. And some families also send their children to, residential facilities or schools because they cannot live under the same roof as the rest of the family, which is such a difficult concept and idea and step for a family to have to take. But in protecting the family as a whole, it's a dire step, a last resort that sometimes is taken. So that's the double empathy problem. That was the foreword. Now we're in the preface. The preface states on page XX that this book has been inspired by the training efforts I co-lead at Anna Freud with autistic individuals. I began testing out ideas that would eventually evolve into the National Autism Trainer Program back in 2018. And then she explains that in 2018, I began working at Anna Freud, co-designing and co-delivering the children and young people's psychological trainings curricula with teams of autistic individuals of all ages and clinicians. So she is incorporating actually autistic individuals into this program of research and training. Through this experience, I witnessed the barriers, opportunities, and benefits of placing autistic individuals at the heart of planning and implementation. Now we're going into page XXI. The mental health experiences of autistic individuals must be shared with our trainees if we aim to improve local mental health services. Trainees must be aware of stressors, autistic burnout, alexithymia, factors that contribute to autistic happiness, and how to collaborate with autistic individuals in therapy rather than working on or for them. So she's explaining the reasons why they include actually autistic individuals in this program and how beneficial it is. By working together, we maximize the chances of finding ways to enhance the mental health of autistic individuals by collaborating with them and focusing on aspects that matter to them in their preferred ways. How beautiful is that? On page XXII, or page 12, she says, this book offers a humanizing approach, setting it apart from many others that primarily focus on the clinical features of autism and corresponding responses. Instead, this book aims to summarize autistic perspectives and experiences on service improvement. It explores ways for professionals at all career stages to shift from a mindset of fixing, in quotes, fixing, to one of sharing power and co-designing models of support. This brings back what Ido said, or what Ido's mom said in his book, how as he was learning to communicate, the experts that were working with him would not believe that he was able to do that, or that other autistic people would be able to do that and called him a savant or a 1 in a million genius. They didn't believe that it was possible for other autistic people. And this book is saying that, yes, that is what we're all about, is figuring out how to break down the barriers and shifting from fixed mindsets into new ways of thinking and helping autistic people. So beautiful. And the last paragraph, almost the second to last paragraph on page XXII, talks about how I was sharing trends in the workplace. The importance of fostering a neuro-inclusive service culture based on acceptance and learning from autistic people's experiences will be discussed, particularly in the context of supervision. The book will describe a model of supervision that considers how both autistic and non-autistic individuals mentalize and predict each other, aiming to help professionals maintain their capacity for thinking and continuous learning in their work. So this paragraph talks about how people with autism and people without autism can work together and start to learn to understand each other for who they are, not the presuppositions that we have on them based on what culture has taught us about autism over the years, and breaking down those trends that have developed over the years to what is actually true and what we experience with actually autistic people in real life, in real time. And I think that can also help us develop better support systems for autistic and neurodivergent people in the workplace if we take the same approach. On page XXII, page 13 of the preface, there is a note from a 10-year-old autistic human with a diagnosis of autism and ADHD. And this 10-year-old autistic human is also known as Sloth. How cute. The 10-year-old says, people who will read this book should try not to be too loud with us and to be nice. We have enough stress in everyday life. If you want to help us, make us feel safe and connected. We have enough worries about disappointing everyone around us and feeling disconnected, trying to fit in constantly. If we feel it's not getting well with the people who are around to help us, we will lose all hope. Then ask people to read this book to understand a little bit more about what it is like to be autistic and interact with professionals. Many autistic people gathered to write this book. Oh, and next time they meet someone like me, or even me, please believe me. Listen to me, even when I can't use my words to tell you what I am going through. This 10-year-old very poignantly says that she and other autistic children and people can project and communicate without words, with and without words. And she wants you to please listen when we project and communicate with or without words. So adorable. And finally, on page 11, at the end of the page, it says autistic advocacy, both in and outside of academia, is leading to the gradual acceptance that autistic people might be able to contribute towards knowledge of what it is like to be autistic. The involvement of autistic people in research has led to the development of new research areas that address the genuine priorities of autistic people, such as sensory processing and mental health. I love this trend in bringing autistic people back into the research and paying attention and shifting our attention to their specific needs and what they are telling the researchers that they need. That it's so important and so smart and so needed. Like, finally, I'm so happy to hear that. The last trend in data I want to share is from the Community Report on Autism 2023. This is the most recent report from the CDC, and this network, the Autism and Developmental Disabilities Monitoring Network, or ADDM for short. And the latest data from this network says that 1 in 36 8-year-old children are identified with autism spectrum disorder in 2020 in the United States. And there are, I believe, 11 states in this network that were studied. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11 states that they specifically studied in this network: Arizona, Arkansas, California, Georgia, Maryland, Minnesota, Missouri, New Jersey, Tennessee, Utah, and my home state of Wisconsin. Of the 1 in 36 children who are diagnosed with ASD in this 8-year-old age range across America, they also give the following percentages for ethnicity. Black is 29.3, Hispanic 31.6, Asian Pacific Islander 33.4, and white 24.3. And that's the prevalence per 1,000 children. And in Wisconsin specifically, since that's where I am, our number is the same, 1 in 36 children. Our ethnicity breakup is 35.6 per thousand is Hispanic, 23.8 are Black, and 25.9 are white. Phew, I got through all the books that I wanted to review. I just have a few more thoughts that came to me when I was taking a bath today. So this morning, I didn't have to go to work. It was a beautiful day of easing into the day, like I really enjoy doing. I sat with all of my books. I wrote down all of my notes. And I was really excited to get into recording this episode. I wanted to skip my bath. And I thought, because I talked with Laura yesterday in the episode that I will be sharing after this episode, we talked about slowing down and purposefully taking better self-care of ourselves and modeling that to others. And we kind of did that in the episode. And I thought, well, I should do that today too. Even though I'm so anxious to get to recording this episode, I'm going to go ahead and take my bath, take my time, not rush into recording, curl my hair and everything, And as I was in the bath, I had many more thoughts about all the notes that I had just taken, which was such a great reminder that it takes me longer to process information than many people. That's one of my symptoms of autism, is longer processing. And so as I was in the bath, kind of just relaxing and taking that time for myself, I had some more thoughts based on the notes that I wrote and the refreshing of my mind of all of these different ideas and research over the years, over the decades and the century, 115 years. And so I took some more notes in the bath. So this is from my phone. So this reminded me of another trend in therapies for people with autism. Is I talked about actually the importance of exercise, as Ido talked about in his book and as some of the other books talked about. But then I remembered that there is something called cross-body therapy, where there are specific exercises and sports even that integrate the two sides of our body, like jumping jacks or touching your toes. Like the right hand touches the left toe and the left hand touches the right toe. And then in many other cross-body exercises that help our brain integrate the two hemispheres, but then also the communication of our brain to the two different sides of our body. And it helps us to better process our proprioception, our presence and position in the world in relation to the floor or the ground, and depth perception and movement and coordination. So that is another trending and emerging treatment therapy that is very important for autistic people, and I think for all children and all people. I also thought of thinking of physical therapy and physical fitness and exercise. As I was taking my bath, I remembered how important water skiing has been for me in my physical development, and even in helping me do well in my schooling and education all through high school, and helping my cognition and processing. Water skiing is very cross-lateral because especially when you go from using two skis to one ski, your feet are in alignment and your body has to work cross-laterally constantly the entire time you're water skiing. And I progressed from just water skiing recreationally to being on a water ski team, which I talk about a lot in my first memoir, Autistic Revelations Body Edition. And I learned all sorts of tricks and fun things while I was on that show ski team. But I was learning how to swivel ski, which is extremely difficult. It's called the act of 1,000 falls, because in order to learn each trick on a swivel ski is where the ski stays going forward in the forward direction, but then the binding that your foot is in swivels on a ball bearing apparatus. So your body, your foot and your whole body turns either 180 degrees or 360 degrees backwards and forth on its own axis. You're spinning on your own axis. And I struggled to progress in that act more than the other girls who were learning how to swivel ski. It took me much longer to learn how to do the tricks than the other girls. And I kind of plateaued. I was not able to get to the higher levels of ability on the swivel ski as a lot of the other girls were able to, even though I'm very physically fit and I'm very physically able to do a lot of these very difficult tricks on a water ski team. I just couldn't get to the higher level in that specific act because of, I think, the way my brain and body are not able to communicate and coordinate at that very high level. But remembering that act is called the act of 1,000 falls made me think of the analogy that learning what therapy modalities will work for your child or any adult even is kind of the therapy of 1,000 failures, mistakes or mishaps, or, things that didn't work, to figuring out what does work. And it may be that, a lot of the therapies that you try won't work. It may be that some of them, even though they don't fully work, they're beneficial, but moving on to a different modality will be better. And sometimes it's harmful, and moving on to the other modality is very important and vital. But you have to try the different things to figure out what doesn't work and to figure out what does work. So it's kind of the therapy of 1,000 modalities is what I'm getting at. I want to thank you all for listening. This has been so fun to share all of these books that I've been reading for so many years, and putting together the way they connect and the journey that we've been on as a society of discovering human capacity and capability and development and help for people with autism and neurodivergence. So thank you for getting to this point, to the end of this episode on projecting trends and data in autism and neurodivergence, and projecting hopefully forward into the future of where we are going in treating and helping people with autism and neurodivergence. So thank you so much for listening all the way through. And please help me to help others find my episodes by liking this episode, commenting on it, sharing it, and subscribing to my channel. And please share your thoughts of all these many things that I've talked about today. I am so interested to hear what you took away and what stood out to you and what was important to you, and what maybe you'll utilize in your life for yourself or for others. I really appreciate the comments, and I look forward to connecting with you and responding and having some feedback and some reciprocity in our communication and projecting our thoughts to each other, not just me projecting my thoughts to the world. So thank you so much. I appreciate you all so very much. And until next time, bye-bye.